Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another episode of In the Frame. Today we're going to look at the second recent Indicator box set. This is From Hollywood to Heaven, the lost and saved films of the Ormond family from 1951 to 1997. This contains 13 films, but there's actually more if you count the extras. There's quite a few films included in the extras. But unlike most of my videos, I'm not actually going to recommend this box set. It is a box set for the brave of heart. It's a box set that is probably comparable to The Weird Wisconsin, the films of Bill Rebane, from Arrow, and He Came from the Swamp, the William Griffey box set from Arrow as well. These are B films. So the Ormond family from Nashville, Tennessee, pretty much started making B genre films, and I'll go through them. But then they started making born again Christian films, which are included in this set as well, which are quite extraordinary for different reasons. But as I said, it is one of those rare occasions that I'm not necessarily going to recommend this box set to you. Obviously, if it piques your interest, then go ahead. Again, Indicator have made a 6,000 unit run. I'm going to make a guess that this will still be in print probably in about 5 years, but maybe that's just me. So you do get nice art cards. There is a lovely booklet. This is Estes Perkle, but we'll get to him later. What a wonderful name. I mean, again, it's a lush, wonderful booklet. Smells of freedom. You know, again, there's a distinct two halves to the Ormond family story, which I will get to. So it's a wonderful booklet. You do get lovely art cards as well, of some art posters for the title. So that's A Footman Tire You, What Will Horses Do? I'm still not sure what that means. The Grim Reaper, Untamed Mistress, 40 Acre Feud, Believer's Heaven. So wonderful art cards that you would love to be made into t-shirts so you could wear them round town. These are spines 390, 391, 392 and 393. Again, this is a set. Some of these films are restored by Nicholas Winding Refn, and I would say this box set is an example that everybody shouldn't necessarily listen to everything Nicholas Winding Refn says. He is essentially in the same league as Quentin Tarantino as far as being humble and not self-promoting in any way, shape or form. So we'll start. Well, this is the poster for Please Don't Touch Me. And there's the poster for White Lightning Road. So we have Untamed Mistress from 1951. You could say the good thing about these films is they're generally an hour and a half or less, and a lot of them are just about the hour, which makes them a little bit more watchable. Then we have Please Don't Touch Me from 1959, which is 67 minutes, and White Lightning Road from 1964, 95 minutes. Now again, I mean, you can look down your nose at these kind of films, but then you could say, well, where's your box set from Indicator? Where are your films that have been restored by Nicholas Winding Refn? So Untamed Mistress is one of the best in the set, I would say. This is... It's got big gorillas, or men in gorilla suits. It's about a wild woman, curses, wonderful locations in somebody's back garden. But again, the actual technique, the filmmaking techniques, are actually of a fairly high standard. The acting in some of these films, perhaps not. The star of the show is really Tim Ormond, because he makes an appearance in, I can't remember which one of the first, I think maybe White Lightning Road is the first one, where he's a child, and over the years he appears in pretty much all the films, and then he took over a bit of directing and writing as well. So as a family affair, and June Ormond appears in some of the films and produced some of the films, so it is a real family affair. So Untamed Mistress, I would say, is one of the best ones. And then you have Please Don't Touch Me, which is a moving story of a girl who was sexually assaulted when she was 15, and now she's grown up, and she's married, but she doesn't want her husband to touch her. And then we get a 10-minute segue into the history of hypnosis, and then through hypnosis we find out what her story is and why she doesn't want her husband to touch her. It's a moving film. The performance by the actor that plays her mother it's seen to be believed, but it's quite wonderful. And then we have White Lightning Road, which is the racing film. So we kind of have the wild jungle adventure film. We have the advert for hypnosis through sexual assault film, and we have the racing picture about two rival stock car racers and corruption and bribery. It's 95 minutes long. It's probably too long, but it's a solid little time passer. And then we get, well, this is the exotic ones. Well, look at that cover. And then we have Girl from Tobacco Row. Even though the Girl from Tobacco Row doesn't actually feature that much in it. But we'll start with 40 Acre Feud, which is probably by far the worst film on here. I couldn't even finish it. It's one of those... It's the hillbilly film with lots of country music, which I just can't stand. So I didn't actually finish 40 Acre Road, I have to say. It's 86 minutes, and by about 20 minutes you're looking for the barbiturates and heroin, to be honest. But then we have Girl from Tobacco Row. As I say, the Girl from Tobacco Row doesn't actually appear that much. It is another kind of hillbilly film, but it is much better. That's 86 minutes from 1966. And then the exotic ones, which actually mentions there's a thing in the swamp and they refer to it as Swamp Thing. That's 1968, so I don't know when the actual comic for Swamp Thing actually appeared. But it's also crossed with the misadventures in a strip club. There's an innocent young girl singer, but of course the lecherous nightclub owner wants to make her a star, but of course she has to dress sleazy. So it's this mashup of hunting for a swamp thing and also all kind of malfeasance in a strip club. It's strange fun. Plus, there is a cast member called Sleepy LaBeef. So if you're a Sleepy LaBeef completist, then this box set is certainly for you. That's the exotic ones. But now the tone of the box set changes. Now, I don't know whether the Ormond family became born-again Christians before they got involved in what's about to happen, or whether during the filming they became born-again Christians because they were convinced. But here's the poster for Estes Purkle, Prophecy of a Doomed America. And here's the poster for The Burning Hell. Guess where this is going. So we'll start with If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do? From 1971, which is 53 minutes long. And this is... They did a trilogy with Estes Purkle, who is a preacher, a fairly fire and brimstone preacher. So the trilogy, it's one of the great trilogies in cinema history, is If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do? The Burning Hell, and The Believer's Heaven. Don't worry, they still mention hell in The Believer's Heaven. So Footmen Tire, What Will Horses Do? Is quite extraordinary. It's an anti-communist diatribe that if we don't save our souls, the communists will come and kill our children. They'll make our children work in the fields all hours. Even though during these 4 films on this disc, they do kind of contradict themselves plenty of times, but that's beyond the point. I'm not going to sit here and point out all their mistakes that they make and contradicting their own argument, but because that's too easy. But Ormond uses quite graphic violence. There's scenes of children and adults being mown down by these nasty communists and thrown into mass graves. It's quite an extraordinary little film. And they talk about brainwashing, which of course is kind of ironic because that's exactly what they'll be doing in the next several films. But it's quite an astounding 53 minutes. You can certainly spend worse ways of spending 53 minutes than watching If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do? I mean, Estes Purkle is one of those preachers that has absolutely no charisma, but he has a kind of certain delivery that makes him look as though he's desperate to relieve himself of something, but absolutely bland, no charisma whatsoever. But which is a common theme from all of the preachers that we'll see in the next 7 films. They're all fairly bland and lack the charisma gene, and they're just literally trying to scare the shit out of people so they believe in Jesus and they'll go to heaven. Next, from 1974, comes the classic The Burning Hell, which is 58 minutes. And again, this is just absolute fear-mongering, absolute brainwashing. There's always somebody that doesn't believe, and by the end they believe, and they're like happy. There's all of these people with that kind of glazed look with a grin, as if they're constantly happy because Jesus is the Lord and Saviour. I mean, the films are disturbing just because of the ridiculousness of them, but the fact of the matter is these were made in the 70s and you could play them in cinemas now and they'd probably do really well and people would believe them and go, oh, that's really convincing. But all it is 58 minutes of scaring people. There's images of people in hell, there's historical reenactments of people who didn't believe in Jesus and then ended up in hell, and obviously there's shots of hell and them regretting it. It's quite wonderful. And then 1976, The Grim Reaper, which again is 1959. We get a break from Estes Purkle. But again, this is about a biker who didn't believe and dies, and his friend, played by Tim Ormond, believes, but the father of the biker doesn't believe, and it's basically convincing the father of the biker to become saved, and of course at the end he becomes saved and he's automatically a lot happier. And again, lots of glazed expressions, lots of historical reenactments of people who didn't believe and then believed, lots of shots of hell and people suffering in hell. But then we have the truly demented The Believer's Heaven from 1977, which is 60 minutes long, and this is where there's a little bit of contradiction, and there is a classic scene which really sums up the whole kind of movement. Estes Pirkle is back, you'll be glad to know, even walking about outside. But there's also shots of him obviously preaching to people, and then he'll turn to the camera and preach to the camera, which is quite disturbing, with all that lack of charisma. But he talks about, heaven, there's no night in heaven, so it's just daytime all the time, which is a bit weird. And obviously if you're disabled, because there's a really disturbing bit when they get all these disabled people up and they sing songs about how they're going to be changed when they go to heaven, and if you die, if you're 90 for example, you de-age in heaven, and the images of heaven are basically people in white robes just dancing about a garden for eternity. It's like there's no night time. You don't sleep, you're just awake for eternity, dancing in a garden in a white robe for eternity. Okay, but one of the things, because he's talked about in the previous films in the trilogy, he's talked about money won't help you, and earthly goods won't help you, but then he says in heaven everybody gets a mansion. Everybody gets to live in a mansion in heaven. So heaven must be a big place. They do say it's in the clouds, even though, as we know, there's nothing in the clouds. Maybe that's a hint. But again, it's like, don't worship earthly goods, don't worship money, but you all get a mansion when you go to heaven. And then the classic moment is, I have a preacher friend, he's got a mansion, let's look at his mansion. And we get a tour of this mansion, and he's sitting in the study, and Estes Pirkle is saying, and he does a lot of hard work, but this mansion is designed to help him ease his burden of all his hard work. So it's like, and who pays for the mansion? Oh, of course, poor people who come to your church. It's just so bizarre, because for the previous films, he's talked about, money won't help you, you have to get rid of that. But of course, here's my preacher friend's mansion. And of course, you'll all get a mansion in heaven. I mean, that's a classic moment, but the classic scene is Pirkle says, now listen to these facts. He uses the word facts from another preacher who tells this wonderful story of 3 people that he met. Somebody was in Ohio, somebody was in Texas, so thousands miles away, hundreds of miles away. They've never met, they've never spoken to each other. But the 3 of them died, went to heaven and came back. They were on operating theatres, and those bloody doctors brought them back from heaven. And he asked each one of them, in separate visits, you went to heaven? They said yes. Can you tell me what heaven was like? And they said yes. So he had 3 stories of what heaven was like, but then he proceeds not to tell us what heaven was like. It's like, surely if you're wanting to advertise heaven to people and how amazing it was, surely you would actually tell these facts of what heaven was like. It's like so funny, because he's like, I asked them what heaven was like, and they said yes, I'll tell you what heaven was like, and they all told me what heaven was like, but I'm not going to tell you what heaven was like. And then it just cuts back to Estes Pirkle, and it's like, yep, those are the facts. It's quite extraordinary. It's a wonderful scene, because you will just be sitting there going, what? You have three eyewitness accounts of what heaven is like. You're trying to sell heaven to people, but you're not going to tell them what there's like. Unbelievable. And then we get to the fourth disc, the Second Coming, or it's about the Second Coming. And then the stark realism of 39 Stripes. So we have 39 Stripes from 1979, which is 60 minutes. It's about the Second Coming from 1982, which is 56 minutes. And the Sacred Symbol from 1984, which is 60 minutes. Now, 39 Stripes, if you don't know, is how many lashings a man can take before he dies, because apparently 40 lashes of a whip will kill him. So 39 stripes is 39 lashes. So we're in this prison chain gang, and obviously Tim Ormond is there, and all the convicts don't believe in heaven and Jesus, obviously. But then Tim Ormond's character's sister keeps writing him, telling him how great Jesus is. And then a friend of the family, who's rather attractive, she starts sending him letters, and slowly he gets convinced. But of course there's a hard man in prison who beats him up for reading the Bible and stuff. But then the warden, who seems a very kind warden, lets him meet with this woman, lets him lets him preach. And of course by the end all the prisoners are convinced, including the hard man who brought a knife to stab him, but puts the knife down on a little bench that says love. And once again everybody's reformed, and everybody's converted, and everybody's really happy. You know, the end scene in Bigger Than Life, with Nicholas Ray with James Mason, and the family is like sitting there and James Mason's like grinning inanely. That's pretty much the end of all these films. And then we have It's About the Second Coming, which is a futuristic tale where Christians are persecuted by robot men, but they still have their faith because Jesus is coming. He's still coming. And this is another odd one that talks about end days and obviously the rapture, and they keep saying obviously people who believe in Jesus will be taken up in a twinkling of an eye, whereas everybody else will be left in this terrible place, which isn't as bad as hell, but it's still terrible. It's a lot of fun. Obviously some people might take it seriously, but obviously some people don't. And then we have The Sacred Symbol, which is a very strange film. That would be a surprise. Which is 60 minutes from 1984. And this is about a man and wife who go to an adventurers club instead of going to church. The wife wants to go to church, but the guy wants to go to the adventurers club because as an adventurer he really wants to hear. And it's basically this adventurer telling all the guests about these weird and wonderful cultures that believe in other things. And it's basically lots of stock footage and the guests criticising people around the world for not believing in Jesus, basically. It's fairly offensive in that regard. But again, another odd entry in this box set. I mean, the box set is 1951 to 1997, and obviously the last kind of, I'd say proper film, but the last film is 1984, but the extras, I mean, Tim Ormond kind of took over. So we have A Tribute to Houdini from 1987, directed by Tim Ormond. which is 60 minutes, which is actually oddly enjoyable. And then we have a 71-minute documentary from 1992 on Lash LaRue, A Man and His Memories, about the Western star, which again is actually quite fascinating. We have June Carr, the Virtual Vaudevillian from 1997, which is half an hour, which is Tim Ormond's loving portrayal of his mother and collaborator June Carr Ormond. And then we have Forgotten Memories from 1997, which is 20 minutes, which is a short drama directed by Tim Ormond and starring June Ormond, in which two women meet under extraordinary circumstances. The extras on the classic disc, as I like to call it. I mean, there's commentaries. There's a commentary on this with Greg Perkle, son of Baptist minister and Ormond collaborator Estes Perkle. I don't know whether the creators of Dark Souls, the video games, got the Estes flask idea from Estes Perkle. I'm not quite sure. So there's commentaries abound, and there's actually an audio, a 64-minute audio from 1970 of one of Estes Perkle's sermons, which I'll have to admit I have not listened to. Again, on this one, it's just more commentaries. Yeah, there's just a pile of commentaries. Yeah, because there's a commentary on the exotic ones with actress, exotic dancer, fire eater and carny queen Georgette Dante, which I haven't listened to. And again, on the first one, first disc, there's more commentaries, and there's the moving film Edge of Tomorrow from 1961, which is 50 minutes long, which is June and Ron Ormond's lost portrait of UFO huckster Reinhold O. Schmidt. And literally the name Reinhold O. Schmidt is mentioned in the documentary voiceover about 50 times in the 50-minute running time, so you'll never forget the name Reinhold O. Schmidt. So that's the Ormond family box set from Indicator. If you're exhausted listening to me talk about it, you should try watching it. But in all jest, it's an interesting box set. Again, it's a box set that nobody else would do. Okay, maybe Severin Films perhaps, but there is fun to be had in it. But again, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, you should definitely pick this up immediately. I wouldn't even recommend it on sale, to be honest. But for the apocalyptic Estes Perkle trilogy, if they release that as a single release, If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do, The Burning Hell and The Believer's Heaven, I would maybe pick that up on sale if they ever release that as a single disc. But certainly as a box set, I mean, the work they've put into it is astounding. I mean, there was a flood. How apt. There was a flood, and again, these films were saved. Obviously, you could argue whether they were worth saving or not. That's a different argument. But good old Nicholas Winding Refn certainly thought so. And obviously, he did Night Tide for Indicator as well. He was part of that restoration. So certainly another fascinating box set. We'll call it that, from Indicator. But not one I would tell people to go and buy. I would tell people to go and buy the Pemini organisation, which is under the plush category on Indicator's website, because that still hasn't sold out, which is just mind-boggling. So go buy 2 copies of the Pemini organisation rather than buying From Hollywood to Heaven. But again, if it sounds up your street, by all means support Indicator. But I would maybe wait for that Estes Perkle trilogy to get a single Blu-ray release. I'm not sure what the demand will be for that. And if any of you are members of the Estes Purkle fan club, then please let me know. So that's a rather exhausting episode of In the Frame, from Hollywood to Heaven. A fascinating journey. Obviously this came with a huge book, which I did not buy, but who knows, the book might actually be more interesting than the actual films. So this is Soldier on from Soldier on Film, saying farewell.